Today I'm going to discuss a Bible verse. I researched the Greek terminology that was used in the original text to find evidence to back up my argument or my idea. I did the research in order to keep myself from using a logical fallacy, specifically a false analogy in my argument. By refraining from using false analogies, we make ourselves and our arguments much more credible and reliable. The verse that I want to look at is Galatians 6:1. It says, "Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently." In the original Greek, the word Paul uses for restore is katartizo. This word actually means to replace a dislocated joint. Paul was using his own analogy in this verse. This fact is really interesting to me because last summer I worked in the ER at the Army Hospital in Fort Bliss. And while I was there, I actually got to see a hip being put back into place. This is a very delicate process, and unfortunately, no matter how gentle you are, which you can't be very gentle, but no matter how gentle you are, it is very painful. There are three things about the dislocated joint that I think that we can apply to this verse. The first is that while the joint is dislocated, it's not very painful. It feels really weird, but it's not incredibly painful. So if we look at that as sin, when we're stuck in sin, we don't always necessarily feel the pain of it. Sometimes we're not even aware of it at all. The second thing that we can look at that paints the picture even clearer is that the smaller the joint, the less the pain when you're putting it back into place. So the bigger the sin, the harder and more painful it is to put right. The smaller the sin, the easier and less painful it is to put right. The third thing that is really interesting about dislocated joints when we're comparing them or using them as an analogy is that when you put them back into place, the pain is gone. It just disappears. So when we're pulled out of our sin, we immediately get relief. It's instantaneous. It's really incredible. I watched all of those doctors. I listened to that woman yell and scream in pain. And she was on some really, really strong medications. But then when it was all over, I watched her whole entire body just relax. Her breathing slowed, and she fell asleep. We're called to intercede when we see a fellow Christian fall down. But how we do it matters. We're never told to criticize others, but to intercede. Paul knew this, otherwise he wouldn't have taken the time to write this verse. He wouldn't have painted the picture the way that he did. Broken down into common English, he said, "Put the bone back into its joint gently." Galatians tells us that one of the fruits of the Spirit is gentleness. So if you live by the Spirit, that is one of the characteristics that are going to describe your response to someone who is struggling. And when our friends are stuck in sin, and we're criticizing them because we know that they are wrong, we need to stop and think about how difficult it is to get out of sinking sand with a dislocated joint. We have no right not to help each other, and we have no right to leave each other with dislocated joints. We're responsible for each other.